What if civilization started over? Episode 7. Let's continue this great story. Our episode begins with the dark blue team. They are getting pretty well prepared for just future experiences with wars, or just with trading, with expanding, with traveling, with expeditions. They are getting well prepared. But something inside of the blue team is getting a little bit tense. Because these civilizations, these settlements are pretty far away from the original main rule city. They are getting different opinions than the dark blue team itself. All these 5 settlements are coming together at one of the 5 settlements and were arguing what to do with our problem they had. They wanted to be separate from the blue team. They were scared if there was a war again with the red team because they sort of saw it coming. Or, well, they were just scared of any war with the outside world. Mainly red, brown, or the 2 new that were discovered recently. They were scared that they were going to be used as people for the army. Or just their supplies would get run out because of the war. So they wanted to separate from the blue team. They eventually got to the blue king that was now ruling the land. And he actually was kinda surprised, but also he was sort of expecting it, that people would eventually want to separate. So before he really said to himself, I will just not allow this, he thought about something else that happened all those decades ago with the red team right here. And they were like, let's agree, let's make you your separate country, let's just give you what you want so everyone is happy. So a new country formed out of the blue's territory, and actually the blue king later regretted saying this. And the new country formed, the purple team. But now we don't have a capital, so let's see what the capital city for purple team will be. It's right here in the north, in this great place. There is the capital city. Also, pretty recently we got this country that was formed after they wanted to separate from their neighboring countries. These islands belong to the red team, and this little part of Italy belonged to the magenta team. They were actually not that happy with what they got. They wanted to expand their borders, and so they did. No one saw it coming, but they landed their ships right near the place where it all begun, and they captured a settlement that they really were interested in, the history, but not only that, but just the riches that were lying there, because this country knew that it all started right here, where they could have great powers. They started to head down south towards this settlement, and they captured it as well. They were so fast, and the red team was just overrun by them, and they were not seeing this coming at all. But they of course fought back and got one settlement back from them and separated the 2 armies into 2. They slowly but surely were going to get their other land back, but it was pretty hard. These men were really strong again, and sadly the red team was kicked out. They were just too strong. The dark reds were just too powerful for the red army, and they didn't saw this coming. They thought they were happy because they separated from the reds and the magentas, but this was just something that no one saw coming. A peaceful country that just popped out of nowhere and started to invade other countries, but they ignored the green team. They started to slowly head to the 3rd settlement. They almost took it. Luckily the red team could fight back and hold them back for a little while, but then they heard news about another invasion that was happening right at this very moment. The brown team was attacking the red team, and they saw this not coming. Not yet, they saw this eventually coming, but it was just too fast for the red king to handle all this. 2 fronts, and the brown team was also so strong. They were so strong. Sadly, no army was settled here closely to this border, so just people, just civilians of the red team were fighting back, but they were so weak and they couldn't get that much land back, and they were just slaughtered right after they just got a part of it. And the brown team slowly headed south, and people were really scared that lived here, that knew about this invasion, and just no one saw it coming. The brown team left the orange team and even the magenta team alone. They were not focusing on those teams. They were purely focused on the red team. And the Red King eventually asked something to his people. Why are we getting invaded by two countries at the same time? After just slowly getting pieces together, the Red King started to think that this dark red country was a setup by the brown team to get pretty close towards their capital. It was just a theory, but the Red King started to believe his own theory. The dark reds also landed in Spain, near also a settlement that they were able to capture. It was shocking because it was just so fast. Also dark reds were able to get this settlement. The Red King was just not prepared for an invasion this far inland. They were prepared at borders, but not near one of their settlements. So eventually the Red King called out for help towards the green team and the magenta team, but they both were not interested in having another war, especially magenta. Green was not really a part of this great war, the great unknown war. Magenta was, and was still just building back up from what they lost. They didn't lose any land, but they lost people. So sadly the reds were losing from their dark reds, and the dark reds were able to get another settlement in their hands. They slowly marched south here in Spain and got another one, and the Red King was so mad. He just was so confused as well that he went on a secret mission towards the capital of the brown team, and when he got there he wanted to speak with the king. And the king quickly sort of let it slide that he was indeed a part in this separation with the dark reds. The Red King wanted to back off and return to his land. He thought he was just safe, that he just could land there, that he can just walk away safely in the enemy's territory. But sadly the Red King was slain by the Brown King himself. He was killed. There was an attempt on his life, and the Brown King succeeded. The Red King was dead. No one was there to get in his seat. There were people interested, but they were just too scared. They were like, we are just in a war, what do we do? Our king is dead. They eventually knew this, but it took like a few days before they knew, because the brown team did eventually send people that went together with the Red King back to their home, so they could tell it to their own people. And this was really bad. It was really bad. The army was like, are we fighting for ourselves? So indeed, a little part of the red team's army was going to fight back. Here in the north, at one settlement they lost. Also here in a settlement they lost. Here against the green border. But many from the army just left and fled into the green team and never came back. It was pretty clear that the red country, the red team, was falling apart. It was imploding. Before anything could happen, the brown team got whatever they wanted from them, and they eventually reunited with the dark red army. And the dark reds just left, so that the browns were able to get it. This whole land here in the north was just there to grab. The magenta king and the orange team were not interested. They were not getting this land from the reds. So the brown did. The brown took this land. The dark reds, however, in the south, were able to get much more land out of it. Also, some people fought back against the dark reds. It were just civilians that didn't really knew how to fight. And eventually, this part of the red team was just there to grab. So the dark reds did. Also, the green team was not here to grab anything from the reds, but they sort of wanted to save them as well. So what they did was painful to see for the reds inside their own country. The green team started to grab land from the reds so something could be saved. They got a settlement they sorted things out so these people will be saved from an invasion, because they sort of expected that the Dark Reds would invade this territory as well, but they didn't. Also, the Greens were able to get this settlement safe. It was pretty clear that the people wanted to be saved from themselves. They were falling apart. The last remaining people that were still fighting were killed by the Dark Reds, and they eventually met up with the border with Brown, and Dark Red was just going to grab it all for themselves. They were able to get a pretty amount of great area out of it. Along the coast, almost towards the last settlement here in the south. It was really close towards the capital. And if they got the capital, it was over. But they didn't, because of another factor. People inside the red borders were also starting to separate from the Reds. And they were able to hold the Dark Reds back. And the Dark Reds were pretty great at still fighting, and even got another settlement from the Reds. And while this was happening, the Dark Reds were able to get a pretty great amount of land here as well. And while this was happening, the world knew about this eventually, and they were baffled at what was happening. The oldest country in the world was falling apart, but the Green were finding a way to still save them a little bit. The yellow team that popped up inside the red team were able to get a settlement that were on their side. Also, these two were starting to separate from the Reds. Another group in the north started to pop up. A light blue started to separate from the Reds. It was pretty clear. People were separated and were divided by their own causes in the past. The Red King never had to travel towards the Brown King himself. If he did not do that, the Red King or even the Red team were still standing at this point. And when this light blue team met up with the yellow team and with the Dark Reds, these 4 or actually 5 groups, the light blues, the yellows, the Dark Reds, the greens and the reds that were still remaining, were coming together and started a sort of peace treaty. Not a peace treaty per se, but just an agreement on who would get what. Who could get which land. And let's see what came out of that. And this was the result. Dark Red got a great portion of their coast where Red lied. Also a great portion of Spain. But Yellow got a great portion as well and got their capital right at this tip across the Red team's original capital. They were still alive. The 2 settlements that were still like there, they were upped as sort of major cities. So they were like seen on the map. Light Blue got a great portion as well, and the Brown and the Dark Reds did not really had intentions to invade the Light Blue or the Yellow territory, and they were actually happy that Red got like really small from this imploding. Red still got this area that they traveled to all those episodes ago, and also these islands. But that's like closed off because Green was able to get also some stuff towards this coast. And because of all this, the Reds are reduced to just a little tip on the map. They were pretty large at first, before the Great War as well. They were like spanning from there towards here, in Italy, almost here. Like they were big. Well, not that big, like towards there, like this. But now they were just here in Morocco. Nowadays, Morocco. Maybe it was a shorter episode, but we will continue in episode 8 what will happen in Central Europe. Because also there, settlements are getting built that really want to separate from their original countries. This was it. See ya then.